Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bankroll Burners, the podcast for poker players who can't stop getting it in bad. I'm Mike.
And I'm Josh.
And once again, as normal, we are here to talk about how bad we are at poker, go through some hands we played this week, but we do have a guest on the program for the second half of the show. Hooray!
That's right. It'll be fun to welcome another guest, and just want to apologize in advance for any currently for any audio issues you may experience. Our apologies for the quality. We've ran through a number of technical difficulties, and have things running as best as we can. So you're gonna have to bear with us, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, we are neither professional audio engineers nor professional poker players, so you get what you get.
Yeah, this is like a side hustle to a side hustle, if you think about it.
Right. This is like, it's what you think about. It's like an inverse because both side hustles lose money in time. So
exactly. Well, anyway, why don't we get started? As far as poker goes this week, I took a shot at some 2-5 at Encore Boston Harbor. I was running really hot in the 1-3 game. I doubled up my $500 buy-in quite quickly and thought, well, this is a good time to go play some 2-5, since if I get crushed, then I'll still walk away down 1-3 buy-in, which is pretty good. So I've got a hand from 2-5. I did wind up getting crushed in the 2-5 game. But I mean, it was actually kind of a weird dynamic, because I would say of the 8 players at the table, 4 were nit regs who were just not really playing any pots. And then there was one guy who was just kind of a classic loose passive live player, and there was one guy who I'd basically classify as a maniac, where he was. But it was a weird, he wasn't playing like a maniac pre-flop. He was limp calling literally every hand. And then just betting and raising super aggressively every hand, post-flop.
You would call him a loose aggressive player.
Yeah, exactly. It was weird. It's weird to juxtapose that over the sort of limp call pre-flop play. But I did wind up losing all of my money to him when he actually made hands, and I made not quite as good hands. So, that's life.
Well, it's funny, actually. The hand I want to talk about this week also has to do with the lag, although I do agree that limp calling a lot pre-flop is not really laggy, not loose aggressive, pretty loose passive, but then, of course, if he turns up the heat post-flop, it kind of works.
Yeah, and then I wound up playing a short session in the juiciest 1-3 game ever, where once the clock hit midnight, people were just limp calling every single hand forever. And, it was one of these things where if I picked up aces or hit a set or a flush or a straight or 2 pair, I would just be raking in huge pots, and I didn't. So, but I am glad that I did not bluff my stack away when people were just not going to fold at any point during the hand.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Good being cognizant of your table conditions. Back to your comment about playing 2-5 at Encore and, there being 4 kind of nitty regs there. I mean, is 2-5 the biggest game in the room?
Oh, no. There was definitely a 5-10 game running. There's also a 5-5 PLO game running. There is a 10-25 game that runs once in a while. I don't know if it was running. It was a Tuesday night or Wednesday night, so not sure if the 10-25 was running. I think there was one table of 5-10, 2 tables of 2-5, and a bunch of 1-3, and also a couple PLO games.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I just think, if I'm there grinding away, playing 2-5, not wanting to be actiony and just wanting to, make my hourly, whatever. It's those players, you can't have that many of them in a game before, it doesn't work anymore. So I feel 4 is too many.
I agree, but it actually worked out quite well. I mean, obviously, despite my results, I feel it did work out quite well, where because this lag was playing so many pots and the other sort of loose passive player was playing so many pots, I really, whenever I picked up a hand, I just found myself either heads up with one of them or 3-ways with one of them, because the other guys just didn't want to play. And if one of them raised, I could just super tighten up my range, because I know that they're playing a super solid opening range.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about this many times in the show about those players we try not to be those players, even though we are for-profit players and bad at being such, but we are trying to play properly to the best of our limited ability. We try not to be nitty, action-killing, quiet, like lamos.
And it's actually quite funny that you brought up, whether that 2-5 game was the largest, because the 1-3 game I played was in a card room, not Encore Boston Harbor, and it was the largest Hold'em game running, and it just played insane. The guy to my right just, was the big winner. He had no idea how to play. He was, 8 beers deep. Every time I folded pre-flop, he would show me his hand, as he was limp calling, and be like, this is my favorite hand, it always hits. And it was 10-5 offsuit, 8-6, and he hit more often than not, which was just hilarious.
Well, that's good poker. So.
Yeah.
Why don't we get into a hand here, though? So what's your 2-5 hand?
Yeah, so this is a 2-5 hand, as you mentioned. I find we are playing, so it's a 2-5 1K cap. I'm in for I have about 600 in front of me. This is fairly early on. I already have a sense of the table dynamics because it's very obvious. It's kind of weird because at a 1-3 game, I'm used to kind of having to wait to figure out what everyone is because some people are just bad and don't really. I don't mean that derogatorily. I just mean a lot of people playing 1-3 just don't really have a strategic bucket they fit into because they're just kind of playing cards. And so you kind of have to figure out what the best exploits are. But here it was it was obvious who the two people who were playing loose passive were, and it was obvious who the guys who were playing solid poker were.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And I picked off one bluff from this lag, and so we're sitting 600 deep, which I guess I should update on our handy dandy tracker. I am sitting in the low jack. It's an 8-handed table. I'm sitting in the low jack with Queen Jack of clubs.
Okay.
So I elect to open. I make it
in this 2-5 game. What's the standard open in this 2-5 game?
It's 20. 20 is the standard open. I mean, it's little more than 1-3 being 15. The multiple tends to go down, but it's 20. And as I make it 20, the loose passive player on the button and the maniac in the big blind both call.
Okay, well, hey.
Which is pretty much what I expected to happen, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely would rather that than the reverse. You don't really want the maniac on the button,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like when you are playing against a player like that on your immediate left, you kind of have to tighten up, which can be kind of lame. But it sounds like that wasn't the case, so that's good. No,
he was pretty much sitting directly across the table from me, which I think was fine. It worked out pretty well. So we're off to a flop, which is actually quite an interesting one. It comes out 8 of hearts, 6 of clubs, 5 of clubs. So we've got Queen Jack of clubs, we've got 2 overs, and a flush draw.
Very cool. This is interesting. I mean, this is obviously not a great flop for your range. Probably this hits the big blind the hardest, but it should hit the button a decent amount as well. I think both your opponents can have all the sets, whereas you might have, you definitely have 8s, probably 6s, 5s, maybe less so. But of course you're going to have way less sort of straight and 2-pair combos than they will. So I'm assuming you're thinking about checking this board.
Well, I think I'd be checking a lot here, but I think this is probably a hand that I can polarize to some extent. Maybe not to the extent where I'm over betting or making a full pot size bet, but certainly in the 2/3, 3/4 range with a strong draw. I mean, obviously, a couple considerations are that I don't have the nut flush draw. There's the button and especially the big blind can definitely have all the ace-x of clubs and probably most of the king-x of clubs also. I just know they're playing loose. The big blind is definitely calling with all of those hands. So, with that in mind, maybe a check makes sense some of the time, and I'd maybe weight betting my bluffs more towards, maybe it's 7x of clubs, maybe it's ace-x of clubs, but I decide this is basically good enough and, want to build the pot if I do hit. So the big blind checks, and I do make it 40, but...
40 into 60, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess my question about this is do you have enough sort of thick value here to be doing this with? like where you're balanced. I mean, because I feel like you've kind of named a lot more bluffs that you could have that are sort of better, like the nut flush draw, combo draws, obviously. And I mean, do you have, when you're getting down to be like, okay, queen jack of clubs, like, do you have enough thick value, especially since you're taking this large polarizing sizing? I mean, you have like 8s and 6s. You probably don't really have the straight here much at all. I mean, I guess I might just check call here for that reason, but I don't think betting is terrible, but I guess that's my initial reaction.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Thinking about it now that I mean, I guess I obviously won't have all the ace-x of clubs probably. I guess I probably am racing all the ace-x of clubs if I know myself. Probably, I have been trying to shy away from playing hands like 7-9 despite our previous podcast episodes. So yeah, I think there's definitely merit to just check calling here. Check evaluating. Opponents can definitely have very strong hands here. They can also have a lot of middling value and misses. Kind of given that's my other thought is given how many hands they're playing. Like I just think they're also going to have a lot of misses. If they have sort of ace-x, king-x of a different suit, they're probably just going to have to fold a lot of the time here on a connected board.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I guess the other thing, too, is with maybe some of these stronger bluffs, rather than putting them into a bet range, you might want to look at them like check raises instead. So it might be good to have a few more bluffs in your, betting range, not check raising range. So, I mean, I don't think it can be that bad. I definitely don't. And I do think that if you're going to bet this board, you should be using that large sizing. So.
Yeah, well, it does. This bet does not achieve the desired result of chasing either player out, as both opponents call.
Interesting. They
just
call. Okay.
Yeah, it just goes call. So there's about 180 in the pot, about 540 behind, and we do go to the turn. Still 3 ways, and the turn is going to come probably one of the worst cards I could see, which comes the 6 of diamonds.
Wow. So we pair the board, and yeah, I mean, well, at least less likely to have it set, I guess. But
that's true. I mean, it does cut down some of their thick value, but I mean, they certainly might even be calling one street with a 6. Sure. And any pair on sort of a wet board, and the big blind checks. And what do you think here? Should we keep the pressure on, or is this a spot to slow down and try and realize some equity?
I mean, I think if you bet here and get raised, you probably have to fold, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I guess the question is, if you bet here, are you folding out any hands that called the flop? I think you're folding out gut shots probably if you bet here, so there's that. Probably not folding out an 8 though.
Right.
Obviously not folding out a 6. Probably not folding out any flush draws, any nut flush draws. I guess you could be folding out some worse flush draws, but you're beating those hands anyway.
Yeah, so maybe it's like fives, getting folds from any sort of 5 hand or ace high if those hands decided to float for whatever reason. I mean, maybe something like ace 7. I don't know if that,
I mean, it probably should fold.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the button should fold that hand, but I guess the big blind probably shouldn't. Yeah, I don't know. Man, yeah, I feel like you can check call here versus the big blind pretty profitably. I think it's a little dicey if you check the button bets and the big blind folds. I think you have to really look at his sizing.
Yeah, and obviously I can't check. I can't check call against the big blind because he has already checked. It is worth noting.
Yeah, what am I talking about? Okay, yeah. So, well, that's very silly of me. Anyway, yeah, I would just check here.
Yeah, I agree, and I think also, there's some merit to, betting better flush draws, maybe, because, again, I'm definitely not folding out a better flush draw, which I'm also losing to. I mean, maybe I can just, bet again on the river, but I don't really want to play this hand as, a 3-street bluff, because, the board is just so bad for me. Pretty much my whole range. I'm not even feeling wonderful about this if I have, aces.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you also might not be good if you make flush here. I mean, I think you will be a lot, but you might not be.
Yeah, and to your point about sort of checking to the button and evaluating, I agree. I think if the button puts out, a small bet like 50 to 70 sort of range, we can call a lot. But if he bets quite big, I do think we're quite happy folding as well. I mean, it's really just an odds question a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because your implied odds against the button are never going to be that good unless you're doing some river leading. Remind me, the pot here is we're talking. It was 60 on the flop, right? So it's now 180.
Yeah,
like that.
Pot's 180. We got 540 behind, so about 3x pot remaining. Yeah, I just think I kind of agree, and I think even if the flush draw does come in, I mean, I'm probably not getting thick value from worse hands unless someone has like exactly a 6. Just because the flush draw is pretty telegraphed and like it's a dynamic board. There's a lot of strong hands. It's unlikely that we're going to get like a ton of value. Like we're not going to get stacks in, especially now that the board's paired. So we do check, and the button checks as well.
Oh, okay. Well, we might make our flush here. Okay, so what happens?
So I was quite happy to see the button check. Great to realize equity. And the river is going to come a really interesting card that kind of brings up a big decision point in the ace of spades.
Okay.
So the ace of spades, it's not. It obviously does not improve me at all. But here's where things I think get quite interesting. With 180 in the pot, the big blind is going to lead now for 35.
Okay, so big blind leads into 180 for 35, and just go through the board one time for those just listening on the audio.
It's 8. I can do it. I have it right in front of me. So it's 8 of hearts, 6 of clubs, 5 of clubs, 6 of diamonds, ace of spades. So 8, 6, 6, 5, ace. The front door club draw, of which I have the queen and the jack, has bricked. So we're sitting here with queen high. And I'm happy to hear your thoughts here, but then I can kind of talk through some of what I was thinking in the moment and after the fact.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, you've got sort of a guy who likes to get after it, right? This is the big blind. I mean, the button certainly shouldn't have that strong of a hand. He can have an ace as played for sure. So that's, I guess, a consideration. If you raise here, given your description of the button as a very loose passive player, if you raise the big blind, I don't know that the button will fold an ace, which is sort of a concern, even though he ought to. But nevertheless, he might not. So I would be a bit worried about raising. I mean, I assume that's the question here is like, can we raise as a bluff? Certainly we can't call.
Right.
But I mean, this is such a weak bet. That's like such a very, very much a block sizing. I think that we can have a lot of ace X as played, obviously.
Yeah, ace king probably checks the flop a lot of the time. But maybe sometimes it's like strong enough to bet, and like ace king can certainly be played in this fashion. Good point about the button. I think the multi-way aspect is kind of what makes it interesting, because I think if the big blind bet this heads up, it's probably like a raise a lot. Because but the other issue is that the big blind, like playing in flow, this is his real first opportunity to sort of bet in flow. So he could have a strong hand that he's just basically reading both myself and the button for weak and wants to extract value from like really bad hands with like a 6. I don't really think that's going to happen a lot. I think most players tend to bet fairly large with their like thick value hands.
Yeah, this could be like a weak ace. This could be an 8 if he thinks an 8's good, although it'd be kind of odd. It could also be like 9s or something bizarre like that. Yeah. I don't think your hand is really bad to bluff with, because you block clubs, which you really want them to have clubs.
Yeah. And maybe there are other combos that are, with clubs. Maybe something like, for example, I know we talked on the flop about like, betting more with like 7x of clubs. Not that I should really have that many 7x of clubs hands, but maybe if I have ace 7 of clubs, I guess it's not going to be a bluff. Maybe king 7 of clubs if I raise with that, right? Where it's like, hey, now I actually block, like, at least I block some strong hands, right? Like, stuff like that where it's a little bit better. Although there just aren't that many of those combos that I'm opening with and haven't made at least a pair given the board texture.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. Given that you took that sort of largish sizing on the flop, like, and then checking the turn, like I guess you have to question like what are you really even doing that with on the turn? Like what are you betting the flop with and then checking the turn with for value? Like that's like a value-y hand, I guess. Like
you're right, and it would basically be like ace king of clubs, like ace queen of clubs. I mean, maybe it's also kings, queens. Like I mean, it could be an overpair, but those hands I think would be kind of a pure call here at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think any large like ace king through ace jack with the ace of clubs is fairly credible. So the question is like, are you raising those hands for value? Like you're probably making a thin value raise, you're probably not making it very large, right? I think if you bomb this, it doesn't really make any sense. But I think you could make a case for going like, I don't know, 120, like something like that.
Yeah, well, I think it's just kind of an interesting thought when we kind of realize, between the button being in the middle, the big blind putting out such a weak sizing. In the moment, I basically like autopilot folded. Like I was just like, oh, I'm super done with this hand. Like this card sucks. Like there's a guy behind me. Snap fold. So I didn't even really think about this all in my head. Like I probably should have. But I kind of think that I could just like fold this hand here. Like
I think this specific combo is not great to bluff with. I think you made a good fold. Yeah,
and then the button folds as well. So we don't get to see what the big blind has, but like not too worried about it. It was just and I don't think it's like a slam dunk raise. I just think I kind of thought about it after, and I was like, oh, I probably should have at least given this more thought as to like given how small this bet was. So
yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like you're sort of handcuffed by that bet size. It's like, man, he's telegraphing so much weakness. Can I get after it? But I certainly think, I mean, if you think that he will usually fold to a raise just because he's bad and is just stabbing, then I could see doing this with your entire range in a very unbalanced way. So, I mean, I guess if you told me you raised, I wouldn't think it was crazy if you had that read. But certainly if you're looking to, like, find bluffs here, I wouldn't use this combination.
And also if you're trying to like if we're trying to like get him off an 8, it's kind of an awkward spot where like we want to be raising small because that's what we would do with value, but like I feel like most players like are just not folding like an 8 to a small raise here. So
yeah, it depends on the player. I would say some would.
All right, well that's my hand. So why don't we move on to the next one?
Cool. Well, I have a hand also played against a loose, aggressive type of guy. And this was a hand that I absolutely butchered because, well, probably for a variety of reasons, but the biggest one being that I thought my opponent had a lot more chips than he did. So...
well, that's weird. I've never heard that one. I know the, like, oh, my opponent was hiding their big chips, so I thought they had more. Never heard that my opponent was hiding their small chips, so...
my opponent did nothing wrong. I'm just a dump. No, he had won like a large pot and then had lost a bunch of pots, but I like wasn't paying close attention to his stack size and assumed he still had a decent amount of chips from the large pot he had won, but he in fact did not. So.
Okay, so are we playing? Is this our usual 2-5 game?
No, actually. So I was playing 2-2 this week. Again, my buddy's in town, so I wanted to play with him. So we were playing 2-2, and it was, I mean, it's so interesting, after playing 2-5 for a while and then playing 2-2 for a few nights, it's like the games are so different just in terms of the weird stuff you see. Like, I don't think that the 2-5 players are particularly, like, amazing at poker or something, although there are some who are. But I think for the most part, like, they just do less weird nonsense. So like, for example, I saw a hand where a gentleman called next to act in a multi-way pot with queen high, no draw. So just interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some situations and at some tables, it can definitely be frustrating too, where you kind of realize like I just have to throw strategy out the window and just only go for value and just like bet with like top pair or better and just like bet 3 streets because my opponents will call me with like nothing, and so I just can't bluff. Like there's no point in bluffing a river when there's no fold equity.
Yeah, I think that can be true. I mean, certainly didn't think that was the situation here. Like, I don't know. I like to have fun. I was making some fun 7 deuce bluffs, all the good stuff. So, I mean, whatever. It was a good time. profitable session at the end of the day. But
Well, great.
yeah, this guy had sat down pretty recently, and he had been in a lot of pots. So he had sort of telegraphed. He's also doing a bit of trash talking. Like I was like, all right, I know this player type. So this guy was a lag for sure. And he and I had already tangled a couple of times. In one pot, I had 3-bet him pre-flop. I don't even remember with what. Something like, some kind of suited Broadway, maybe Ace-Jack, I think. Oh no, I think he opened a button and I 3-bet with Ace-Jack offsuit from the small, I think is what happened.
Sure.
And then he 4-bet, so I was like, well, I'm definitely tossing Ace-Jack off in the muck here. This is before I knew anything about the guy, but it became clear to me that he was not 4-betting a tight range. But for the most part, I'm mucking anything to a 4-bet pretty much in live poker because people don't 4-bet, but this guy was. So
yeah, unless you're suitably deep, you have, good cards, stuff like that. I know what you mean.
Yeah. I mean, I think this guy was not playing like an incredibly nitty 4-bet range like the vast, like 99.9% of low stakes live players. So,
got it.
And that's relevant here. So we're 200 effective, and I thought we were 300 effective. So that's relevant here. But we are 200 effective.
Okay.
And we're 7-handed, and I'm in the small blind. And I have black 8s.
In the small blind.
Yes.
Cool.
And there's an early position limp, and this loose villain makes it 9 over the limp.
And where's this villain? Where's this villain in the? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, this loose villain makes it 9 over the limp, and like this is obviously a small sort of bullshit raise. I see players when I play against players like this in the past, like they do make lots of these small sort of raises and sort of juice up the pot. I think it's part of their strategy to like make the pot bigger so that you can push people around with larger bets on later streets, that sort of thing.
Yeah, not like the other type of player who's just scared of making big bets because, like, I had a guy recently in the straddle with like 8 limps to him in a 1-3-5, made it 15, and then was shocked when everybody called. Like, not in like I'm juicing up the pot to bluff later, but like in I have a strong hand and this is how much I want to raise. So good to recognize that distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think this is just, again, this is a very aggro type of guy. So I'm sitting with my black 8s in the small blind, and I think that this is just a 3-bet even against pretty much any type of opponent. And so I make it 35.
Okay. Makes sense to me. I might even go a little bit bigger just because of the limper to kind of disincentivize the limper from calling.
That's true. Yeah, I think I could have gone 40.
Yeah,
right.
But I think 35 makes total sense.
And then it folds back around to him, and he pretty quickly makes it $114.
Okay.
So what are you doing here, given the background I've given you?
114. Well, I mean, if we're only $200 effective, I'm probably just jamming. Like from out of position, I feel like he's just gonna have like we might even have him crushed. Like I feel like he just might be doing this with like a pair below ours. I feel like we're gonna be flipping a lot of the time, and then like some small percentage of the time he'll have us beat. But I think we're in pretty good shape. I'd have to think we're actually in okay shape against him.
Okay, I think that's fair. I thought we were 300 deep, so I didn't really consider jamming. I think if we were that deep, I think it would be a mistake to jam.
I agree.
If we were that deep, would you just call, or would I assume call, or would you fold?
I mean, I think we kind of have to. I guess if we're 300 deep, so then we'd be calling. There'd be like 230 in the pot, and we'd have like less than a pot size bet behind. I mean, it just kind of gets tricky post flop. Like, are you just calling off like most flops?
Yeah, I mean, my thought, again, thinking we were 300 deep, I was like, I'm just going to call here, and then I'm going to call any flop not containing an ace or a king.
Right. So, I guess that's probably fine. Like, it's just a little awkward because we are like out of position. It's like, if we check and like he checks back a board that's bad for his range, and then like an ace or a king hits the turn, it's like, well, crap.
Right.
And it's just like with one pot size bet behind, even if we do assume that it's like 300, I don't know. It's such an awkward spot.
Yeah, I think honestly, I did butcher this hand, and I think if we were as deep as I thought we were, I'm probably just supposed to fold.
I think so, because I think our hand is just slightly too marginal. I think for like pocket tens we can probably play as a call. Pocket nines probably in the middle. Maybe like that's kind of what I would think if we're that deep, because like once you get to tens, like you're gonna have an overpair like a decent percentage of the time versus like pocket eights, and that's like that makes our decision like even easier.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I should have folded given what I thought the situation was, and then I should have jammed given what the situation was actually. But I actually did just call here, which I think is a pretty big mistake. Out in general, calling pre-flop versus lags, you just shouldn't do it. You should always just put in another bet or fold, because they're just going to put so much pressure on you post-flop. So I think that I made a pretty big error here.
Yeah, and again, even if we're 200 deep, I don't mind just folding eights. Like I do think we have better. I do think we have better hands that we're three. Like this is basically the bottom of our three betting range.
Yeah.
Like even with all that background, I still don't think it's atrocious to fold pocket eights.
Well, I don't think it's atrocious, but I do think it is better played as a jam versus this type of opponent.
Yeah.
He also might fold.
Yeah, absolutely. If he's just getting frisky, he certainly might fold.
Yeah. So yeah, I think a jam is in order here, but I did not jam. I called.
So now there's like 85 left and 230 in the pot, so we have like a third pot behind.
Which is so silly. So Anyway, the flop comes 9-7-3 rainbow. I don't remember the suits, but
that's fine.
Irrelevant. Yeah. And I'm like, well, this is a bad flop for ace king. I don't think it's horrendous, because I shouldn't have that many. Like I shouldn't have that many sets here. I think he's probably ripping ace-king for the most part anyway. I think he's probably ripping just most of his hands. So I check to him, assuming I have to throw in a call chip, but he actually checks back.
Okay. I think we probably have the best hand here.
That's my thought. I was
yeah.
Like, all right.
Because, like, if you're going to be a lag and you, like, flop an overpair or something, you may as well take advantage of it with, like, a third pot behind and just stick it in, right?
Yeah, that was my thought at the time.
Okay.
But again, remember, I am thinking he has, like, almost pot in his stack.
Yep.
That is what I at the moment. So,
right.
The turn comes a jack, or completes the rainbow.
Okay.
And I'm thinking I still probably have the best hand here a lot, and I'm also thinking I can get some value from ace-king if I bet, small, which I realize that betting small would be just ripping it here, but I didn't know that at the time. So, because again, I was being bad and not paying attention to stack sizes. So, do you think that it's reasonable to think about going for thin value here? Even, let's say, for the sake of argument, I was thinking about just jamming for value. Do you think that's crazy?
I don't think it's crazy, but I don't think we're beating, like, it's just annoying. Like, this is why kind of calling free flop with eights is, like, meh, in my opinion, is just because, like, we see now there's, like, two overcards, and, like, it sounds from this type of opponent that he could just have hands with jacks and nines in them that are not going to fold. Like, which is just not ideal, right? And in most 4-bet pots, that's just not going to happen. But, like, it sounds like opponent is the type who could have 10-9 suited, Jack-10 suited, Queen-Jack suited, King-Jack suited, like, all these hands that, he's just kind of giving up, checking back the flop because he figures, oh, you called my 4-bet, you're probably, like, ridiculously strong. And now, all of a sudden, like, finds a pair, and seems like this is the kind of thing where even though you're jamming for a small amount, even with this small stack size, he's going to, like, hem and haw and then eventually call you with a better hand. So it's just, like, I don't think it's crazy, because he definitely does have misses here, too, right? Like, he's got, like, ace-10, ace-king, ace-queen, king-queen.
And he might just be like, well, it's such a good price, maybe I'll spike a king or whatever,
Yeah. But I would say, if you thought, even with the stacks you thought, right, then it's like, you're still playing, like, where your stacks are only, like, 3/4 of a pot bet. I think. So
Yeah.
it's like which is still not a ton. Like it's tough to like block bet here because you just don't have enough behind to fold, especially against this player type.
Yeah.
Um,
Check is just in order here in either situation.
Yeah, I mean, maybe but like, then it's also awkward if like he jams. Like, maybe we just have to like shrug call, like, because this does, like, he probably does pounce on weakness and probably doing okay against his range of like all Broadway cards.
Right. Yeah, I think we're definitely calling a jam here if we check. I think we're check calling.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I bet 50 because I was thinking he had a lot behind and I thought I could get some thin value.
Okay.
Nope. Oh well. Anyway, he rips it immediately.
Okay, and he rips it for 35.
Yeah, for
more.
35 more. So obviously we're calling here.
Yep.
Any thoughts on what he has?
I mean, I think I feel like I pretty much said what his value and bluff ranges I would think are, like, value like Jack X Broadway cards and bluffs like the remaining Broadway cards for the most part. And I guess he could have like aces, kings, or queens and just slow play them on the flop because of stack sizes. But like, I don't think he should be doing that.
It also doesn't make sense with like a lag type player.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So I mean, I really, really butchered this hand. Like this is embarrassingly bad, which is why I'm sharing it on the internet. But anyway, he has pocket nines.
Okay. Well, do you get there on the river? Do you get the massive suck out?
Do I get there? I do not get there. No.
Bummer. So the river's not a 10.
The river is not a 10.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing, right? As I was thinking, maybe he's got like top set, and like people love to check top set, but
yeah.
And lives get paid.
Yep, lives get paid. I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, like, I played this hand very badly. I think if I had ripped pre, he might have folded. I mean, honestly, but I mean, nines is an insane hand to 4-bet, for the record.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, he just wants to get money in.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of a cooler, like when you're playing against a maniac and you just like have the second best hand. Like I said, I certainly experienced that a couple times as well, where it was like, oh yeah, absolutely, I'll call on this double paired board when your value range is like super thin, and sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't.
Yep, that's the way it goes. Well, all right, well, we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be right back with our guest. Welcome back, everybody. We are here with our special guest, the one and only Corn. Corn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Corn. I run these online names that have been mentioned in earlier episodes. I'm a college student right now, and I kind of play online and a little bit at MGM National Harbor as well.
I've heard that room is I feel like that room comes up a lot as like one of the better rooms like on the East Coast. Is that?
Yeah.
How do you like that?
I think it's one of the nicer ones, and I think one of the main reasons is they don't allow smoking inside of the casino, so they have their own smoking decks for designated places. Because I don't know if you guys have been to Vegas, but Vegas, most of the casinos will allow smoking, and it just reeks in there on the casino floor.
Yeah, I've never been to Vegas, but my local casino is Encore Boston Harbor, which also is a non-smoking casino, and I've been to a couple others like in Philly that do allow smoking, and it definitely is like night and day difference in terms of my sense enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the poker rooms around Jacksonville don't allow smoking, so that's nice. But I don't think when we played in Philly, Josh, did they allow smoking?
Yeah, in the casino, yeah, but we had to walk through like clouds of smoke to get to the poker room, but the poker rooms are non-smoking. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so, and you usually, I mean, what stake do you usually play at MGM?
So I usually play the 5-10, which turns into a 5-10-25. Usually,
of course.
Just because most of the regs will encourage straddles, and I mean, obviously, it's not always 5-10-25 if one or two people won't straddle, but I would say like 90% of the time it's 5-10-25.
So it sounds to me like these regs you're talking about are the type of regs who are quite good for the game rather than the opposite.
Well, well, I say regs, but I think a good amount of them are pros, like live pros, but uh, live pros and online pros are very different. Because I've played and studied with live pros, and I played and studied with online pros, and I think there is still a significant skill gap. Don't get me wrong, like these guys, these live pros know what they're doing. I'm sure they're well studied, but you just don't get put into as many like tough spots in live.
Yeah.
So you can get by with a lot less.
Do you play online as well? I mean, obviously you play in our online home game type scenarios, but do you play on like ACR and places like that?
I play on Ignition / Bovada as well, and then like a few clubs on
Sure.
Club GG.
Very cool. I mean, obviously Josh and I, we barely strayed past. We've never strayed past 2-5, so we're certainly not playing in 5-10. We're certainly not live pros or whatever the opposite of that is.
Fish is the word you're looking for.
Whales. I mean, how did you kind of work your way up to playing? I mean, how long have you been playing these stakes for? I guess
Yeah, so I started playing poker. I feel like when everyone starts playing poker, at least for guys, and it was in my like childhood friend's basement, summer of my senior year of high school. And we're just a bunch of high schoolers, so we snuck beer in, and we're like, hey, let's play poker, $5 buy-in, right? Pretty, just having fun. And I realized, yeah, my friends are terrible, and I didn't know anything about the game, and that's kind of when we would play a lot of poker over the summer. And then I kind of forgot about it, and then COVID hit. And so everyone's quarantined, and then I was actually watching this guy on YouTube named Greg Goes All In, who would do these almost like these poker bits and skits, and he'd post them on YouTube. He didn't have a ton of subscribers, but I found his channel, and he's eventually started playing with his subscribers in a server. And I watched the video, and I watched someone call the river to a jam with like Queen High. I'm like, okay, I need to join this game. I need to join these games as fast as I can. So I joined there, and then kind of just played 25 NL. I think this was the COVID summer. So, oh yeah, I remember I was working a part-time job as a swim coach, from like 8 to noon, and so I'd work 8 to noon, and then I would play poker from like 1 to like 5 in the morning, and then sleep a little bit, and then just repeat, and that's kind of where a lot of my volume started in the beginning, just grinding out those micro stakes, and then eventually I kind of just worked my way up the stakes over the last few years.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of what we all aspire to, is like you grind it up and eventually you're at the next level and the next level. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I feel like the online, doing that online grinding especially is so good for volume, because you probably played more hands in like 6 months than like I've played it in my life.
Oh yeah, and that's like another thing. Like people complain about variance live. It's like, okay, well you're only playing like, I don't know, like maybe 10,000 hands like a year, which is like, from a statistics standpoint, that's like nothing in terms of realizing your true variance. Because online you could play 10,000 hands in like 3 days easily.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
the volume is just way more, and you kind of realize your skill a lot more, because it averages out for the long term.
Well, are the hands that you've or the hand that you've got for us today, is it from a 10-25 game, or is it from from something else?
Okay, so I got 2 hands, and I'll let you guys pick. So one is from a 10-25, and another is from a very deep heads up.
Well, I think that we will be able to provide more, or understand what's going on a little better from a ring 10-25 game than we would from from a deep heads up game. I don't know. What do you think, Josh?
I agree. I think we had one deep heads up hand from another guest that we just definitely butchered our analysis of throughout. So, but happy to. I mean, this live game sounds pretty interesting. So why don't we go with that one?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. We're playing 5, 10, 25. I got about I'm doing this from memory, so forgive me. I have about $4,000 in front of me. So that's just under, I think that's 180 bigs. Is that correct?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, or something like that. You know, like whatever. Math is hard. I have about 4,000. I look down at King of Hearts, Jack of Clubs. I'm in the cutoff. I raise to 60.
So I assume it folds to you. There's probably not a lot of limping in these games.
Yeah, so, I guess a little bit about the 5-10 games. It's pretty reg heavy, I would say. So there's not a ton of limping. If there is limping, those players are going to be limping every hand. But it's usually just a lot of regs targeting fish, I would say. But, you know, I actually like playing the 5-10 more than I like playing 2-5 live, just because the regs know about ranges, and they know about, like, oh, he raised under the gun, he's going to be strong. Oh, he 4-bet here, he's going to be strong. Oh, he's leading out from the big blind. Like, they have a better sense of what ranges should look like based on positions, and I can use that knowledge against them. And that just gives me the satisfaction, because I love bluffing.
How many games, how many of these 5-10 games are running on any given night? Is it like a one game sort of thing? Or?
So MGM usually only runs one game. Sometimes they'll do 2 tables. It usually starts up around like 2 p.m. depending on the day during the week, and then it'll go until it breaks at like 6 in the morning. If it's particularly crowded, they'll make a must move, but I've never seen more than 2 tables up.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Cool. Just curious about, you know, how many people are playing. And...
Yeah, because some casinos have like 10 tables of 5-10, but MGM's, I think, a little not quite as I guess 5-10 heavy.
Okay. And what's the cap on the game, by the way?
There is a 2,500 cap.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so all right, good 180 effective with the straddle. In the cutoff, you have King of Clubs, Jack of Hearts, and you open it up.
I have King of Hearts, Jack of Clubs. Yes.
Oh, backwards.
We raised 260. Standard. What is that? 2.4. You could argue a little bit bigger since there's a straddle, but 60's been like my standard size for everything.
Cool.
Okay.
And then the small blind calls, and then the straddle makes it 300. And my read on the small blind is just kind of a fish. You know, I mean, he calls him small blind. It's pretty fishy, I would say. But the straddle is, I know, is a pro, and he's one of the better pros, and he's one of the tighter players. I've talked to him a little bit. He's had 10K weekends just going to Vegas. So he knows what he's doing, and he's been regging these games for a long time. And I usually don't mess with him, but, you know, I got a little frisky, so I decided to 4-bet to, I think it was 675. Small blind folds and the straddle calls. And the flop is...
Hold on. Let's just, let's take...
Okay,
think about it. I mean, obviously, you know, King Jack offsuit, probably not your strongest cutoff open hand. I definitely agree that 4-betting it is much better than calling with it. I think calling it's definitely going to be a rough time post flop.
Yeah, and I think in theory this is just a pure fold. King Jack off just sucks.
Yeah, that sounds right. But on the other hand, you know, I think it's okay to like mix in occasional nonsense with, you know, hands like that.
Yeah, and you could argue you 4-bet just a little bit more because of the dead money from the small blind. You could the straddle could be squeezing a lot of hands there.
Sure.
And therefore we can squeeze a lot of hands there. And I've seen him do this a ton before. I mean, he's a pro. Like, he knows what he's doing. He's going to squeeze if there's dead money. So, and I figured, you know, King Jack is it's an okay 4-bet hand. But yeah, definitely not calling.
Yeah, I mean, you're blocking some strong hands, right? So having Broadway, I mean, you know, having Broadways and 4-betting is better than not having Broadways and 4-betting.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's my expert analysis of your pre-flop play.
So yeah, a little no there with the 4-bet, but whatever.
If you're gonna play it, yeah, I totally agree with Mike, and you play it this way.
I can't be pushed around by this guy.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So the flop is Ace of Hearts, 10 of Hearts, 5 of Diamonds.
Interesting.
So not a great. I mean, it's an okay flop, right? It's not the best. We have air. We have a gutter though, and a backdoor flush draw.
Backdoor nut flush draw, right?
Backdoor nut flush draw, yes.
I mean, I don't hate this flop. Like, obviously, it's a bet. It's great for our range, and we get to barrel. We can pick up the nuts. We can also pick up equity to the nuts. Like, we're gonna have a lot of turns we can barrel on, and also we're in position. So if we decide not to barrel a turn, we can check it back and then still make the nuts in the river. So
Yeah.
I don't think this. Like, honestly, if you're four betting with king jack offsuit, I don't really know what you're looking for in a flop. Like, I would honestly like be kind of upset if the flop was like king rag, and you're just like, holy crap, am I even good? Yeah, I think that's like, I think that's worse.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't know how this guy plays. Like, is he the type of player who's like 5-betting aces and kings, or is this a type? Is he kind of taking the no 5-bet approach? That's, I feel like, become a little more popular.
We're just too deep to, we're not too deep. I think we're just not deep enough to justify a 5-bet, because the 3-bet is already pretty big, and the 4-bet is a little bit bigger as a because of the small blind, and so I mean,
so what's it? Here?
So the pot's about 1,400 with about 3,300 behind is what I have after that.
Yeah. Okay. And so, ace 10-5 checks to me. I bet, and I think this is just a board I want to go pretty small. I don't really need to bet big to fold out worse, or fold out I mean, he's gonna have kings, queens, jacks, tens, aces sometimes, and a lot of ace-x, and so my plan here was just like, okay, we might barrel one or two hands or one or two streets and then kind of just give up. I mean, having the king of hearts is good, so hearts come in, we can go pretty ape shit there, but also the ace of hearts is there, so that blocks a lot of our heart combos too.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to represent the flush, I would say, from you, but like, then again, I don't know. I mean, like, if a heart comes on the turn and you bet quite large, like, given the action, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are repping hearts, because like, he's not going to have a lot of flushes there either. So
yeah, and it's just a lot harder, because I'm going to have a lot more suited aces that will 4-bet and not a lot of suited kings that will 4-bet. So I'm more likely he's going to have more flushes than I am technically. So
okay,
just a little minute detail, I guess, but so ace 10-5. I think I bet around 500 here. Like I said, super small. Don't really want to get into a situation where SPR is really low on the turn and I have to call off a jam.
Sure.
So I bet 500. He calls. The turn is a 5 of diamonds. So pairs the bottom card.
The flop was a 5 of diamonds, right? So is this a 5?
5 of hearts.
Ah, great.
5 of hearts. Yeah.
So you either not the backdoor flush draw. You now have it, or hearts come in rather.
Yes.
Quick question on the turn. I mean, I think nothing wrong with going. It's slightly over a third. Is there even merit to going like smaller? Like, because I feel like the board is so favorable for us. Like, we do have a lot of backdoor equity. Like, and after he calls, the pot's like 2,400. We have like 2,800 behind. So it's gonna be tough. I mean, it's not easy to find a sizing on like good turns that we can bet, and there's not a ton of playability is what I'm trying to say. Like, if the SPR is just over 1, maybe we leave ourselves a little bit more if we bet like a quarter pot or a little less, but I don't know. I mean, I don't hate a third pot either. Just curious if you thought about that.
The reason I went a third is just because we're a little bit deeper. Had we been like closer to 100 bigs, I think even like 10% pot or 20% pot is fine as well. Or even just checking on ace 10-5.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I do think that the stack sizes now are a little awkward. I'm not sure that, like, if you had bet smaller, would they be less awkward? Like, not that much less awkward. I think it actually is sort of awkward in this hand. And that's just
they are kind of awkward. And I guess my plan after he calls flop is, he's definitely a player good enough to, continue with like under pairs here and like 10x as well. The 5 is actually really good because it's less likely he has ace 5 and pocket 5s on occasion. And I feel like he would jam all of his boats here on the turn should I bet. So ace 5, pocket 10s.
Well, although it doesn't actually cut down on the combos of ace 5 suited, right? Like, because the 5 is the same suit as the ace,
But it makes pocket 5s less likely to.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, does he?
Which isn't crazy because it's a 4-bet pot, and I don't think he'd be squeezing pocket 5s, but, just out there.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's good to... It's always... I mean, the card pairing does definitely gives him less sort of, like, value jams if we continue.
Yeah, it's an interesting card because hearts come in, so I have the nut blocker, but it also pairs the board, so I'm dead against 10s and aces and boats,
Do you think he has 10s? Is he really ever like just calling out of position with 10s on the flop? Is he not going to ever raise it?
Yeah, he's seen me do some crazy moves before.
Okay.
I have a pretty good history with this player.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Yeah, I mean people aren't often check raising on in 4-bet pots anyway, so I guess it isn't crazy to think he can have 10s. I guess he can have aces here too. So certainly with playing either of those hands in a trappy manner isn't crazy, especially aces. So yeah, I mean, on the other hand, you do have a great barrel card here. Like you did pick up equity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I decide to bet I think 1,000 on the turn, leaving myself around I think 1,800.
Yep, I think that's right.
So and this is leave yourself the ability to fold if he jams, basically.
Yeah, and I actually don't like this bet. Looking back on it, I think I'm better off either jamming myself or checking, because the heart just gives me so much equity, and having the gutter, maybe my king high is good sometimes as well. But the monkey in me saw, oh, we have nut flush blocker. Let's just blast.
So one interesting point here. I mean, I think obviously if we jammed here, like we would be repping like a very narrow range ourselves of pretty much aces, 10s, and I guess ace king with like the king of hearts maybe. Like, do you think your opponent is going to be folding like kings, queens, and jacks or like ace queen or something? Do you think your opponent's ever gonna do you think your opponent is gonna be folding that most of the time to a jam?
I think they're gonna be folding kings, queens, jacks, 10x, but they're not gonna be folding any ace x here, especially if they have like another heart blocker. And so that was kind of my reasoning in the moment, was like, okay, he's not, if like hands that will fold to a jam will also fold to 1,000. And so I save a little bit of money there, I guess.
I agree with
queen's never folding.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think he will do those same exact set of hands. So to a jam versus a non-jam. And I also don't think jamming here is necessarily appropriate like as an overbet jam, because to your point, like you really don't have that much of a nut advantage here. So I don't really think it makes a ton of sense to overbet jam.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think the best play here is to just check and realize, kind of give up too, because we have king high. But
is there a merit?
You could argue either way, but
I don't know. I don't really hate the bet. I mean, I feel like you are trying to I think trying to get folds from kings, queens, and jacks is pretty legitimate here. I mean, you don't beat those hands, and so trying to fold them out. I mean, you might even be able to get away with going a little smaller than 1,000, possibly. And then
I think I could go smaller, but it's live, and I thought I'd look cool throwing in the little pumpkin chip.
Yeah, and also, I mean, to your point about kings, queens, jacks, etc. Like, we don't have a great hand if that's like sort of the hands we're targeting, because like we're blocking way fewer combos of ace x than we are kings, queens, and jacks, because we have king jack. So maybe that adds merit to a check back versus trying to fold out the hands we're blocking.
Yeah, exactly. This is probably one of the worst bluff candidates we're gonna have here.
Yeah, and so if he calls here, I mean, you're gonna have what? What are you gonna
half
attack?
pot, 40% pot behind, basically.
Yeah, which isn't great necessarily.
Yeah, and another reason I bet 1,000 was, I'm trying to make it look like a perfect river jam, right? And like, oh, I have aces, I'm milking you. Oh, I have ace king, I'm milking you. Give you a good price on the river to call.
Well, to that, then I almost feel like we could go a little bit. To Mike's point, maybe we can go even a little bit smaller, like 750, like almost a third pot, like 750, 800. I know you have the live dynamics, and I'm sure it feels great.
Yeah.
Throwing out one of those hockey pucks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, maybe, because then we're still kind of setting up for, a 50 to 75% pot jam. We're risking a little less, but I think that, there's obviously not that much of a difference between those sizings.
I think we were like slightly deeper than 4,000. Like it was maybe like 41 to 4,200.
Sure.
Obviously, I don't remember exactly because I didn't write it down, but it was about half pot on the river.
Okay.
So I bet 1,000. He calls, and the river is the queen of spades.
Hey.
So we make our straight, and then he donk jams. And
Wow.
I'm like, well, I basically, we have the king of hearts, which is good.
Well, yeah. But it does suck because, this is, very much he could have pocket queens. Right?
He could also have, pocket aces and pocket tens still.
Pocket aces, pocket queens, pocket tens would all just jam.
Yeah. There's pretty much, no flushed combos, right? You'd basically have to have, queen jack of hearts.
Exactly. And
it's
those
his
would
only...
probably just jam turn anyways. Or raise flop.
Yeah, turn, right? And that's actually a good point. That I guess pocket aces and pocket tens you'd probably think would jam turn if they're going to be donk jamming river anyway.
Yeah. I think maybe aces would trap, just blocking a lot of hands that will call, but definitely tens. Tens are definitely jamming turn. Flushes are definitely jamming turn as well.
But what are his bluffs here? That's actually because this is really. Yeah, it's first of all it's not that big of a donk. It's not a very polarizing donk. Yes, it's an all-in, but as we said, it's something like 40% pot.
Yeah.
So 50% pot. So it's not that polarizing. What are the bluffs?
Yeah. But also it's live, and it's hard to think about the size of the pot, too. Because I didn't count our stacks exactly.
Sure.
And yeah, so I wasn't sure exactly how much pot it was. I thought it was a little bit more actually. I thought it was close to 3/4 in the moment. But we can't fold. We have king jack, we have a straight, we have the nut flush blocker. If he has a boat, good for him. We pay him off. I think I thought about it for I don't know, less than 5 seconds.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, to think. I'm just trying to think, what is he ever overvaluing something here? I guess would be the first question. And I don't think, do you beat any value?
Ace queen, possibly.
We beat ace queen. We beat ace 10. We beat.
And ace queen kind of makes sense too, right? Ace queen and pocket queens probably play in a similar way.
Yeah, I think the most likely hand he does this with is ace queen.
And he just has so many combos of ace queen versus aces and queens. Because it's the same sort of thing where he's basically thinking, aha, I got you with your ace king.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I liked betting turn, to pull out kings, queens, jacks.
That's true. Right.
Also, why I called so quickly, because there's no way he shows up with queens here, right? After I bet flop at turn.
Yeah, I wouldn't say no way if he's.
If he thinks you're full of crap, then sure, he can have queens.
Yeah,
but yeah.
But he's, like I said, he's one of the tighter pros I've seen. Very disciplined player. Maybe with a heart, but like I said, if he has it, he has it.
Yeah, at that point, if you think he has all the ace queen still, even if we give him all the combos of queens, there's 9 combos of ace queen and only 3 of aces and 3 of queens. So yeah. if we think that that's kind of his donk jam range, then obviously we have to call. If we think he's not doing it all the time with ace queen, or if we think he doesn't show up with queens, maybe that changes the math. But I mean, I don't think I can fault you for a call, especially with the king of hearts, because then again, as we said, like maybe queen jack of hearts is the other hand that plays this way, and but again, that like I definitely agree that him calling the turn also kind of throws off his range, because like with like pocket tens and queen jack of hearts, you would think he would be jamming for not that much more on the turn.
Yeah. Betting the turn just condenses his range so much that he would have jammed anything that beats me except queens.
Right. I think it's pretty interesting. Like, I'm having trouble coming up with a bluff. I mean, I think if he has all the ace queens here, then yeah, obviously it's just a call. But I'm just trying, like, it's really hard to come up with a bluff he could have here. I mean, like, kings with the king of hearts, but you have the king of hearts.
Yeah.
So,
I blocked all of his bluffs.
Yeah, so it's pretty. I mean, maybe like jacks with a jack of hearts, I guess, isn't like completely insane, but it's a little insane.
And again, we feel like we should have folded that out on the turn. So
yeah, unless I have a flush draw, no. But yeah.
And so my hand's like a okay catcher, I would say. The board being paired obviously sucks. Having a flush blocker too, but you know, I guess it's not really a catcher; it's a straight. I don't know. Would you consider straight a catcher there? I don't think so.
No, like that's the thing. Like I think if we're thinking this is a bluff catch, then I actually think we have a terrible candidate because we are blocking a lot of bluffs. But I think if we're like, well, he would definitely do this with ace queen, then I think this is then it's not a bluff catch. It's like I have a strong made hand. I'm gonna call.
Right. Like if we're beating his value and he's doing this with ace queen, then it just then we have to call.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he ended up actually having ace king. I think his reasoning was he thought I had ace king and he wanted to get me off the chop.
So he was turning ace king into a bluff to get you off a chop.
Yeah.
Okay. Did he have he didn't even have a heart?
He can't have a heart, no.
That's whack, man.
Yeah, I don't really think that's like I mean, I don't think that's I don't get it. Like, I don't think ace king is like ever folding out better or getting called by worse.
I guess you could. I mean, if you have ace king here, are you folding? Like maybe.
Folding.
Like if you had ace king with no
SPR is just so low.
Crazy.
And I think I mean maybe it's a bluff, maybe it's for value. I have no idea.
That's so weird.
It was kind of a weird jam. But
I mean, I guess
from
the
like I might fold.
I guess
that's what I'm saying. I mean, you had ace king, like it might work, but it's. I guess if he's never folding to your jam, then I guess it's fine because like he's putting the money. But I don't know. Sometimes it's gonna go check and he wins. So
yeah, I don't know. It's a weird spot.
That's so strange.
But,
like I feel like that's funny. You know, we often talk about like live poker has like the spaz factor, and like I'm assuming like 5, 10, 25 against a bunch of regs, like you don't really have the spaz factor, but I guess maybe you do sometimes still. I don't know. Like this just seems like a spaz I would see a 2-5 player do.
Yeah, and I think part of it is also just like I 4-bet bluff a lot, and these guys, you know, they've seen me 4-bet bluff a lot, or you know,
Sure.
4-bet a lot, so they know I'm 4-bet bluffing to some frequency, and obviously I was here too. So
yeah, but like to Mike's point, it's like if he thinks you just have like a hand of garbage, then he should just check and like plan on check calling.
yeah,
Right? Because like if he thinks that your hand, like if he thinks that you're doing it with like random suited cards, then like if you have a flush, you're never folding, and if you have some other garbage, you're never calling. So it just like it is just kind of a weird spot where if you think about what hands he's trying to fold out and what hands he's trying to get calls from, it's just like the only hand he's folding out is ace king.
yeah,
Exactly.
and I think because I've never really like messed with him. I tend to steer clear of this guy, and like I've noticed a lot of the pros will do this. They won't 4-bet bluff each other so much. It's more targeting the fish, because you know it's better to be in spots against the fish than spots against the pro.
Well, that's why you play it in. I mean, better to do it in position, and that's
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of goes back to
kind of like
pre-flop, where it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right that when you have King Jack and you want to play against this guy who is probably 3-betting on the light side sometimes because of that fish in the middle, why not play it as a 3-bet? If you had, you're in position, better than calling once in a while. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it was really the hand ideally was supposed to end pre-flop, but he called. So
how dare he show up with Ace King and play it in this manner?
Yeah, I would probably play Ace King the same way. Just call the 4-bet out of position.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I bet too when you show down King Jack offsuit, he's probably so tilted. He's like, God damn,
I could tell the whole table was kind of like, what? You forgot that? I got some weird looks after.
Yeah, but you got the chips, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's a creative way to play it, and works out nicely when the straddle just I mean, I really think it's just a spaz. I agree with you, Mike.
Yeah. Well, I think we got to wrap it up there, but thanks so much for joining us, Corin.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it.
And thank you to our lovely audience for tuning in once more to Bankroll Burners and listening to us talk about playing poker badly so that someday you may play poker better. With that, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
We love seeing numbers go up, as always.
Yep.
All right,
Bye, everyone.
Have a good one.